You don't get to choose to not pay a price. You only get to choose which price you pay.
The love you put out is the love you're going to get back.
If I lean on the emotions, my consistency wanes. Welcome to another episode of Price of Purpose. I'm Jeremy. This is Q, and each week we discuss what it looks like to pay the price of pursuing purpose through your faith, family, and entrepreneurship. You don't get to choose to not pay a price. You only get to choose which price you pay. Join us in our passion of finding ways we can be more intentional by paying the price of purpose. Jesus, thank you for this opportunity. I pray that we would seek you, that we would knock on the door, that we would ask the questions, that we would go on the journey with you, that we would find the courage that you command us to have to go out of our comfort zone and grow in the ways that you've created us to be. Thank you for giving us your word. Thank you for being the example that you are. I pray that we would follow that example and live with boldness, courage, and we would live with passion, pursuing the things you've created us for. It's your name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Welcome to episode 11. We are taking a deep dive into the definition of purpose, defining purpose, and today in episode 11, we're talking about when passion isn't enough, building a purpose that lasts.
When was an experience that you felt your passion fading?
One of the biggest times that I felt my passion fading was in the midst of, I'm 2 years in to starting the venue. And the first time I felt that passion fade is when I couldn't even get across the finish line of getting funding to start a business I was so excited about. We'd done real estate. We'd flipped some properties. I'd been in weddings for years, and seeing the dream of owning real estate that we rented out and used it for a place in an area that I was so passionate about, somebody's wedding day, creating a legacy, starting a family line, and doing all those pieces, I was so close to giving up because I had done so much work planning, dreaming, picking out colors, building layout, all the things that would go into making this business successful and be beneficial for the customers we were going to serve, but I couldn't even get to the place to where I could get it off the ground.
When it's situations that are like out of your control, that's kind of the hardest part too.
It is. It's almost like I've heard so many other entrepreneurs and successful leaders that we follow on social media talk about how dreams go to the planning phase to die.
Yeah.
And so many people get good ideas and they even go to the planning process, but then there's that extra step of having a big dream and you even have the plan laid out, but that's when the real jump comes in. Like, I have this idea, I've done all the planning process, but now I have to commit in executing it.
Makes you realize how much you rely on instant gratification.
Right, because having a dream is exciting, and you get that little hit of dopamine, thinking about how cool it would be, how fun and exciting, and you get that rush. And so daydreaming alone can give you that excitement that you're really seeking in the end product. But with daydreaming, you can feel that little bit of rush without having to truly pay the price for it.
Do you feel like you had like purpose in that specific season that you're referencing, or was it just passion?
So I had both. The purpose was to see the end result to fruition. And that's ultimately why I didn't give up. Owning the venue, building the venue, and having a place and a space to see other people's dreams as far as combining two individuals into covenant, their marriage day, the start of their legacy of creating an entire new bloodline and generation going forward in the future. Knowing I didn't want to give up on that piece helped me to put up with things and tolerate the discomfort of being told no over and over and over. Because if the passion faded through that process. Started with passion and purpose. But the passion faded going into that of, man, I've planned. I'm tired of going over which way we should build the venue, how big we should do it, how much we should charge, going through all those little details. What would the website look like? How would I advertise? What amenities would I offer? What would our packages include? All of that stuff had been done, and it was to the point to where it was no longer exciting to think about that. I had it in place. And so as the passion faded, if I had given into the way I felt in the moment, I would have stopped and given up at that point.
What did the fire dying out feel like? So you had the purpose, right? Mm-hmm. What did that gap look like when that fire died?
The primary feeling was frustration.
Yeah.
Knowing I had something I was excited about, but I couldn't get it anywhere. We love control as human beings. And if it were up to me and I just had the money in the bank account, it would have been done a lot earlier. But I was dependent on outside circumstances that I couldn't control to make that a reality. So frustration was a big piece of that. It also chipped into my consistency. It challenged me looking back on it, and even in that process, I dip into this experience so often in my life because knowing how I show up each and every day when I don't want to impacts my consistency. Mm-hmm. So if I lean on the emotions, my consistency wanes. If I learn to be consistent, regardless of my emotions, the product in my life stays consistent even when I don't feel like pursuing it.
Right.
Which is very hard because you're talking about 2-year window just to get funding. And so the pressure just increased. Mm-hmm. And so going through that whole process was very intense and tested me through the whole journey. I mean, and that was a long journey. And I know we both have talked about this before. How have you handled that when it feels like you start with passion, purpose, individually or both, and you go through those rocky seasons and you feel like you lose that, almost like you lose the lighthouse while you're sailing your ship. How have you dealt with pursuing purpose and feeding off of passion, but when they disappear, how's that impacted you?
The moment I think of when I was like 19 or 20, I had confused purpose and passion together because I discovered them both at the same time. So I only really saw it as passion, but really I discovered it when I had built a community of friends that I would host events for, or like I would host game nights at my house. We would do movie nights, outings, whatever. Like I loved hosting and like cooking dinners and just having everybody over at the house. That was something I really just enjoyed and loved doing. And eventually that grew into what was once a loving thing that I really loved to do, eventually turned into this, it turned sour because I started feeling like it wasn't reciprocated or I was the only one putting in effort. And so, yeah, like that led to a lot of like bitterness and like a lot of resentment just because suddenly this thing I was doing didn't feel fun anymore. Suddenly it was like, oh, I'm the only one investing in this. I'm the only one putting in the effort. So I kind of let the silent expectation of receiving something in return affect the way I looked at the situation. But again, it just led to a lot of like bitterness and a lot of distance between me and those friends. So that's what, for me, when that passion died out, it costed me a lot of those friends.
So let me ask you something. Expectations can be healthy, but you brought up something that was, I think, key. You talked about silent expectations. Expectations and perspective are huge. How do you balance that with what to communicate as expectations and what also to say, hey, that's a little over the top? Mm-hmm. How do you find contentment in what is being given in the relationship?
So before I answer that, I do want to note, at the time of this, before I reflected on any of it, I had forgotten that a lot of people in that group were actually offering to host some nights or to chip in and pay for something.
Okay.
So like, I overlooked that at the time. So now going to answer your question, for me, like I now check to make sure I didn't I didn't deprive anybody else of helping me carry the weight. Cause
that's good.
I do that a lot for sure. Cause you and I both, like we both want to be the guy that can do it all. You know what I mean? Like, I do it from the point of view of like, I just want to be capable. I want to be knowledgeable. I want to know how to do everything. So like, I tacked on that pressure myself, and I didn't let anybody else. I deprived everybody else of experiencing that same thing I was, because whenever somebody else would offer to host, I almost looked at as like, you're taking my position or you're taking my role away from me. So that's where like ego came in, you know?
Yeah.
There's like, we're called to serve, but there is that unhealthy point where, because some people just take, man, like some people really don't know how to give back. And I think in those situations, as long as I'm doing what I feel led to do in that moment, and it's not causing me a disturbance in my peace, then I will continue to do it. But really, I mean, it's situational. It's kind of hard to say like there's a cut answer.
Yeah, it's not black or white for just every circumstance.
No, not at all. But for me, like what I do now in those situations, I gave myself two options. One option I keep putting in the effort. One option I don't. Whichever one brings me the most peace is what I now lean more towards. So again, like that's not like a direct answer. For me, that's the discernment I learned is when I'm confronted with those situations, which one gives me more peace when I think about it. And that's usually where I go. That's
good. Yeah, it's circumstantial based on who's in the group, you know, what the goal is for each person, but being able to look into the future as best we can. Nobody's a fortune teller or, you know, we can't see the future. But we've been talking consistently here about being able to use your imagination and empathy of saying, in the future, a year from now, of these two decisions, which result am I going to be at peace with? Which one's going to be healthy? Which one's going to be beneficial? Because we may have an idea of where we want relationships, business, our faith to go, and somebody we're walking alongside may not want the same thing.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to project, cast vision, those items. That way you know each day, like, is this a habit? Is this a relationship that is consistently helping me grow in that direction?
Right.
And if we can do that, we can help base our daily decisions in a way that help us grow in the direction that we're aiming for instead of just aimlessly drifting around. And we do look up in 12 months and like, man, how did I get here? Being disciplined in that area, whether it's, just starting personally, forget building a business, forget, our jobs and our careers, but just personally, if we can get disciplined in looking into that future area and setting those goals daily, when we wake up, we will do things even when we don't feel like it to make sure we're staying on that path. So that 12 months from now will be a version of ourselves that has grown and has improved because we've consistently stuck with the goals we looked at in the future.
Like what you said about other people, it's so important for the other person or for whatever your effort to be reciprocated. That's important in a healthy relationship. And I think if you are in a position to where you realize that you have given a lot of unspoken expectations, the best course of action in that moment is to go to whoever you put this expectation on and humbly apologize and say, hey, I have been feeling this way. I've been hurt. I've been uncomfortable for a long time. I'm sorry that I gave you this expectation. I just didn't realize it. If you can approach that situation like that, now you've put the ball in their court. Now it's up to them to say, okay, now that I'm aware of this, now I'm going to start being more aware of it. Now the cycle can continue. Or, unfortunately, sometimes the other person's going to take that and say, you're asking too much. And not to say you can't work through that too, but at least that gives you your next step. But the first step is you taking accountability of saying, I did you an injustice by putting this this unspoken expectation on you.
Yeah.
Because nobody deserves that. That's not fair.
No, yeah, because clear communication, consistent communication. I mean, some of it, having these difficult conversations can be so difficult. So consistent communication is better than no communication at all, even if you're struggling with how to say it.
Definitely.
As you grow in it, you will develop, just like any other muscle you work out, you will develop how to communicate clearly. Expectations, vision casting, goals, all of those things. The next step of that is understanding. Because we can be talking about things, take this podcast, for example, we could have two different ideas of where to go. And if I'm trying to communicate something, but I'm struggling to get the understanding across, you may not know why I'm trying to even share a direction of where we're going. But clear communication, consistent communication at least helps us see, when we're talking about purpose and passion here, in relationships, if we even have the same purpose in mind.
Right.
Right? And so that's what you just brought up. If we talk about this now, at least we're on the same page of saying, oh, okay, you're coming from here, and I'm coming from here in the relationship. And even though we haven't been talking about it, fortunately, we have the same purpose in mind of where this relationship's going to go, whether it's friendships, marriage, parenting. If you are running a business as a leader, clear communication, consistent communication with your team is huge. And then also getting to the point of understanding why we're going in that direction as a business for the culture helps us then take care of our customers. But it has to start with sitting down and being intentional and having those conversations of training people, whether it be in a business or even in relationships, training people how to read us, interact with us. But when we keep those silent, it does lead us to a place of just resentment and bitterness because they have no idea. Nobody's a mind reader, and those can be difficult. But understanding is a huge piece of also going in that same place.
And I think that's where that burnout comes in too, is you have to ask yourself, what did you expect?
Yeah.
I always resort to that question at some point of what did I expect? And it's usually, okay, well, I expected to have a studio by then, and I've been working my tail off to get here, and I still don't have a studio. So it's like, okay, well, what was that for?
Yeah.
If it involved other people, if the situation involves other people, what did I expect, and did I communicate that to them?
Yeah.
Because if I didn't communicate that to them, I have no room to put them at fault for anything.
Yeah.
Because I didn't communicate it.
Yeah.
So really, if there's other people involved and the expectation hasn't been spoken, everybody's just running in their own different directions, and there's no alignment. It's just a very wide net of energy just going out with no direction.
Yeah, it reminds me, through my years of coaching, it's like having a football team out there and all 11 people on offense are running a different play.
Exactly.
But they're all wanting to score.
They're all doing what they think is the best way to achieve it.
Yeah. So how do you handle when both sides do clearly communicate, we figure out we do have the same purpose in mind, but you realize ultimately the way you've come together to attack the problem is not a way that you'd prefer to go about it, but you're on board anyways. How do you handle being flexible in that situation?
You have to learn to compromise really quick.
That's huge, yeah.
Not change the end goal, but also you have to trust. You have to be able to trust everybody else that's involved to carry their share of.
Yeah.
And I think the hardest part for me, at least in that moment, is, especially right now, dude, like I've been running solo for so long. It's so hard for me to delegate because I know nobody cares as much as I do about what I do.
Yeah.
I'll use this example. So my wife is picking up photography. So I communicate, like I've communicated to her kind of like what I need. Like if we're both on a shoot together, I'll give her the expectation of what I need her to focus on. Mm-hmm. But really, like I've had to really learn to just hands off. I communicated that to you. Now it's you. Now this burden is shared and you're carrying your load.
The trust piece comes in. Yeah,
definitely. And it's been hard, but it's also been really liberating too, just to push myself to say, I trust you with this thing.
Yeah.
Because the beautiful part of that is now she has the ability to learn at her pace. So that way it sets in for her. And she can come to me and ask questions without me feeling like I'm constantly over her shoulder telling her how to do it. She's getting to experience what I got to experience, and the joy of like the discovery of how everything works, like, oh, mess with the different angles, mess with this. She gets to come to me and say, like, look at this, that she did. She now has ownership of that, because if I'm only focused on my end goal, she's doing this for me. Like she's taking these pictures looking for my validation, when what I want for her is to receive her own validation and see how good she is at it and all I did was kind of just point her in a direction. Yeah. That's the coolest part. And that's such a fresh concept that's been given to me too, because I've tried working with people in the past and it's always been disappointing because that level of care wasn't there. But the level of care wasn't there because I gave them a box. I put them in a box and I said, you have to play in this box. Yeah. You know what I mean? So compromise, I think, is the biggest. Compromise and learning to let go.
Which is hard for us to do.
Yeah. You have to share that responsibility for sure.
Yeah. Going back to my example of the football team running a different play, as long as we're all trying to score, get in the end zone, I am one of those people that, hey, I think we should throw the ball. And I'll, say my piece. But if everybody else, the majority is wanting to run the ball, done. Okay, if we think we want to run the ball, let's get it. Let's just all be on the same page and let's move that ball down the field.
And then it's up to you to play your part. Because if you go off and run the pass play like you wanted to, the rest of the play collapses. Right. But you have to put your ego aside for a second and maintain that humility and say, you know what, this is the consensus of what we're going to do. So I will now readjust what role I'm playing in this.
That's totally true. And it's also my responsibility that when, like, let's say if the run play gets stuffed, to not come back to the huddle and be like, I told you so. I was right. Yeah. It is to say, hey, I said yes, I agreed to this. Yes. Practicing compromise, practicing sacrificial love, saying I'm going to give up what I would prefer or what I want, or like you were talking about, the control factor of it. And since I said I'm all in on being with the team, we're going with the run, coming back in and saying, hey, we gave it our best shot. Let's do it again. I wouldn't want my marriage or my kids or my coworkers or the people that have trusted me in my team and the business I created to come back and say, like, I told you so. You let us down. That was a terrible choice. We're going to make bad choices. We're going to miss seeing opportunities and say, you know what, I think this is going to work. And it just doesn't work. And I don't want somebody coming and beating me down over that and saying, hey, that was just terrible. Wrong choice. You missed it.
Hindsight's always 20/20.
Right. Hindsight's always 20/20. So I have the responsibility to make sure I'm not doing that to other people.
Definitely.
Now, if we get in a situation where we're building a team and a business and we've tried the run, and now we're not open to the pass, now we have to have a conversation. Hey, we have tried this. It's not working. Can we try something new? And compromise throughout any relationship when we're chasing purpose from the business team, the sales team, even when you're working for your boss at your job. Hey, how can I compromise and say, hey, yeah, you know what? I can do that. I'll make that work. And in 30 months or in 30 days time, we'll see how this is impacting the team, the sales, the bottom line, and then we can regroup. Right. But being willing to try, willing to compromise is huge in anything we're doing.
If you have more people aligned with the purpose, when that passion does die out, having that unified community backed behind it, it's a lot easier to go through that. And I'm unified community, meaning a football team, a marriage, a friendship. As long as it's unified and everybody's clear on where everybody stands, there's a lot more understanding that comes into play. There's a lot more grace given.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
You know, because you need those people. I've gone through those seasons of when the passion died and I was alone.
Yeah.
And I didn't have like the support groups. I didn't have really, like, I had our weekly meetings, but that was about it. And those are brutal. But if I had utilized people that I was surrounding myself with and shared my purpose with, or like if I shared this weight with them, it would have been a lot easier. And I would have felt more capable of enduring those dry seasons when that passion ran out.
For sure. Because we're going from exploring purpose just as an individual, and when you go to start now having a shared purpose with two people, a group of people, my example of even in the sports world with 11 people at one time, it becomes a little bit trickier. Because it's one thing to drill down your own purpose and be consistent in that and push yourself to be accountable to that purpose, even when you don't feel like, when the passion is fading. And honestly, it's even more important in the adverse moments. When you have a group of people that have the same purpose, we're talking about good communication, we're on the same page, we're compromising, we're sacrificing for each other. When it does go bad, that's when you need that shared purpose together as a group, because you do have people picking you up saying, hey, we're going to try it again. We're going to try something new. We will figure out a solution to this problem so that we can see our purpose fulfilled and we can reach that goal in some form or another. It may not be exactly like we dreamed it originally, but we're going to get to some version of that dream. And it's huge to have that network of people with the like mindset who have agreed to go after the same purpose together.
If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others.
It's so true. So what really ties that all together for me is many people chase excitement, energy, and emotional highs. But when passion fades, as it always does, they feel stuck, broken, or lost. But these are some things that can really help us navigate getting through those pieces.
So that was section 1 of our conversation on when passion isn't enough, building a purpose that lasts. Episode 2 is coming out on Wednesday. Episode 3 is on Friday, or you can wait for the full episode to drop on Saturday. So we hope you join us this week for the rest of the conversation.